Florida State made some big-time coaching changes last week, and we expect more to come in the weeks ahead. How many will they make? Who will they target to bring in next? I talk about that with Richie in today's video presented by BetUS. Richie, last week we recorded at about 1 o'clock, maybe 2, maybe it was a little bit later, but we got some news afterward that Florida State was moving on from some coaches. You and I haven't gotten a chance to talk about that. We have talked about that here on the channel a little bit, but we didn't have the opportunity to chat about it. Florida State moves on from Alex Atkins, Adam Fuller, and Ron Dugans. Certainly expect more changes to come. Just don't think you can fire, 60 or 70% of your staff and get enough things done through the week to help you. We'll talk a little about more coaching changes maybe coming, what you expect, maybe some potential hires, just names that intrigue you. But I haven't gotten your take on it. We haven't talked about it much. So just thoughts on the changes that were made. We had given Mike a hard time for not making changes. Certain people said that certain people not on here said that he wouldn't make changes until after the year. And he certainly did a couple hours after we finished recording, which was not great timing for us, but still probably good timing for FSU. So thoughts on the changes that were made.
Yeah, a little outdated listen for our Monday morning listeners, so we apologize for that. But I remember saying, I think it was like 2:29 or something. I think we started at 2 last week, and I'm like, it is 2:29, and not a single coach has been fired. And I was sharing my frustration, and then sure enough, afterwards, I go down to lay down for a nap. I wake up to a text from you saying, "Hey, do you want to go live? Because we got some news here." But I'm glad you were able to go live and give your take on it. I thought it was necessary. I know a couple of weeks ago I might be contradicting myself. I said I don't know the point of making changes in a season. That was before you lost to Duke, and what's happened in the game since then. So I think it was necessary that these changes had to be made. And to your point, there will be more changes coming. I'm certain of that, because typically when you bring in a new coordinator, they're going to want to bring in some coaches with them. We saw that with Kendall Briles. He said he would not come here to coach for Willie without his O-line coach. So Florida State, I forget who the O-line coach was at Florida State at the time, but he was kind of done a disservice because he got fired after spring ball when the Kendall Briles hire happened. And again, his demand was, I'm bringing my O-line coach. So don't be surprised to see a coordinator come in and say, listen, I'm sure he's been fine at Florida State, but I have my guy and you don't get me without him. So I definitely think more changes are coming. It'll be interesting to see. I'm more interested on the offensive coordinator hire than I am by the DC, just because that'll tell us if Mike is giving up play calling for next season or not.
Sure.
I don't think he's a bad play caller. I just think he is trying to do way too much, which is kind of what Jimbo was doing at the tail end of his career. And that'll just wear you out. I know Mike is still a young guy, so he has time to figure this out. But he has to figure it out, and he has to get these hires right. Because if he makes, a bad hire on either side of the ball, really, I mean, you get away with an average hire. But if you make and we won't know until obviously into next season if it was a good or bad hire. People will have their opinions regardless once the hires are made. But, the financial implications are massive at this point, because the boosters are going to take a hit this year. You have the football-only facility. You're committing to all the buyouts we already have and more to come. So this, and I don't think I'm breaking any news here. This is Mike's career at Florida State hinges on these hires and how well they pan out.
I'll get right back to chatting with Richie, but first, I do want to give some love to our friends over at BetUS. Make sure that you're using our code YouTube150 to get a 150% sign-up bonus on your first deposit. Your next 2 deposits will be at a 125% bonus. It's an unbeatable deal that they're running right now, and they have certainly upped the game for you guys, so make sure that when you're wagering on college football or whatever, you are betting with BetUS. Yeah, it's been whispered to me. I haven't confirmed this by any means, but we talked last week about Mike needing to likely step up and be somewhat accountable to what has happened here, and maybe take a bit of a pay cut, donate some of the salary back to Florida State. It has been whispered to me that there has been at least a restructuring. I don't necessarily know if that's a cut or if that is just deferring money until later. Either way, that's probably somewhat commendable. I think a cut is probably better. But if he's kind of restructured some of his salary to instead of taking 9 this year, take 6 and help with some of the buyouts, right? And then even if you're not truly giving that money back, you're just saying like, okay, in 2029, if I'm still here, then pay me back that $3 million that I helped, because if he's still here in 2029, obviously things have improved quite drastically. I'm not necessarily predicting that I think that's the case, but even just a restructure certainly helps in the near term. I would assume that Florida State's in a better position financially in 2029. They don't have the football only facility. They don't have the Doak renovations right on them. Might be in a new conference by then, or might be making more money from the ACC, which has been rumored too. So all those things considered, and just if he's here in 2029, that means that things have gotten incredibly better, right, than they are right now, and we're making more money. And just deferring would be great. I've not been told if that's like a deferment or if that's just a, hey, pay me $6 million this year and use it for the buyouts, and then you don't have to pay it later. But either way, if that is the case, I think that's a pretty good sign. I think that's something that probably buys some goodwill back with the fan base. That's not been reported anywhere. That is just something that has been whispered to me as a very serious, I've been told by one source that does happen, right? And so I've not got it confirmed. I've not gotten anybody inside the booster office to confirm that for me. Probably won't be confirmed. Maybe a couple of years later is kind of when it came out when Harbaugh did that. But I think that's somewhat commendable. Richie, you talked about coordinators possibly bringing in new guys or bringing in their own guys. Is there anybody on the staff? And I'm gonna not let you say Surtain just because I've been told that he probably won't be here next year anyway, kind of his own choosing. But is there anybody on the staff that you would say you don't want to lose? Like, is there anybody you'd say like, hey, no, we got to keep this guy, or I want to keep this guy, or I think this guy should be back next year?
I'd like to keep Tokars. I think he's, I know the quarterbacks have not looked great this year, but in that, now you wonder what it was between. How much was it Jordan Travis and how much was it the coaching staff? Because Jordan Travis was just that talented. I'd be fine keeping him. Everyone else can go. Honestly, I can't think of a coach that I would lose sleep over if they were not retained by the two new coordinators coming in. You get to 1-9. Obviously, Mike deserves the vast majority of the blame, but that's a team effort to go 1-9 at Florida State. Like that's real. That's I'm not gonna say it's unprecedented, but it is in my lifetime, and I'm 36 years old at this point. So yeah, I can't think of a single one. I think Shannon can go. I think JP can go. Obviously, we had all the coaches let go last week. How about you? Is there anyone that you would be upset to see if they left? Thompson
No.
can go.
Yeah, no, I don't think so. Even Tokars, I think if you could really upgrade at that position, which I don't know if you can. Like, I'm not going to pretend to have like the name on all potential quarterback coach hires. But yeah, there's nobody, right? There's if you wanted to keep Thompson because you thought that he could coach offensive line better than anybody can get, like that's been some of history. Like that's fine. Like I don't want to say like I trust Mike in his decision making because I've just watched this season happen. But if you do keep a couple of guys, like it's not a huge deal to me. If you kept JP, I don't necessarily love that move, but if that's one that you felt like you needed to keep just for some kind of continuity, like that's fine. I don't really care about that one. If you wanted to move Odell to off field, that'd be fine. I'd be pretty displeased with keeping Shannon. I do think you need to move on from like Yak. I think you need to kind of bring in a better recruiter there at the running back position, and so. Yeah, I don't think so. I don't think there's anybody that I'm like, oh man, we need to keep this guy. Surtain would be kind of that guy. I don't necessarily, I don't have the infatuation. I will say, like, not to just crap on everybody. I don't have the infatuation with Surtain that some people do. I do think that he's done a good job and improved some things. I also don't. I think that DB at Florida State, with just a moderate level of effort, probably lands you as many DBs as you want here, right? But I don't even think he's somebody that I'm going to lose a ton of sleep over when I expect that he will move on and either take some time off or go back to the NFL. So yeah, I don't think there's really anybody. I'd be good. I mean, I don't think it happens, but if both coordinators came in and said like, hey, we're wiping out the staff and going with our own guys, like I'd be okay with that. Just like a full on reset. We'll talk about recruiting here in a minute, but I also think that would maybe help you with recruiting some if they brought some guys that they had been recruiting. And in fact, that might be the only thing that kind of salvages your recruiting class. So yeah, you can clean the whole house. I don't necessarily think that Mike does that. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me to see like Thompson and Yak back. It wouldn't surprise me to see JP back, but I'd be okay with it. Tony would be in that. Like those, to me, those are the four coaches that are probably the safest, right? Mm-hmm. Everyone else I think is probably gone. JP, Tony, Yak, and Thompson would be the ones that I'd say like will be back. I don't think anybody else outside of that is back. Maybe Odell in like an off-field role. Is there anybody out there that you look at and you want to go get? Offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, or position coach? Realistic?
I haven't dug in too deep on this yet. And you're gonna it's gonna have to be like a Jeremy Pruitt type hire, right? A position coach at an elite school that he came in, and that might have been the best assistant coach hiring since Mickey Andrews when Jimbo brought him in for that 2013 season. Granted, all 11 of his starters went to the NFL, but that was one of the best Florida State defenses of all time, and we've had some really, really good ones. You're not going to get a coordinator from an elite school unless the head coach is the play caller, and Mike agrees to allow him to call plays at Florida State. Now you're going to have to pay for him, but that's the only way you're going to get a coordinator that would be worth it from an SEC Big Ten school, something like that. The name due after Brian Hartline, the Ohio State wide receivers coach, who's a known elite recruiter. It's going to have to be someone like that, but I don't know if he even has play calling history or not. But maybe he'd be willing to come in and Mike still call plays and he transitions it off. But I think your best bet is going to be. I think you need to go after a well-respected elite recruiter, position coach at a top program like an Oregon, Ohio State, Georgia, Alabama. I think that's your best bet. You can bring in an offensive coordinator, from a smaller school. Miami had success with Rhett Lashley, obviously, but that was only for 1 year at Miami. So it's going to be tricky because how do you sell this job? I guess Mike can say, listen, I made all these changes. I'm going to be here a while. They owe me this much money. Your job is going to be safe for a few years. Come here, prove yourself, go get a head coaching job somewhere else. But it's going to be tricky making these hires, in my opinion. What names would you like to see at least considered?
Yeah, I mean, people joke about it, but like if Mullen and or Muschamp like were open to it, like I'd go for that. And
Yeah.
I know Mullen is not like an amazing recruiter. That said, Mullen like averaged a top 9 class every single year he was at UF, so like he would certainly like as an OC, I think he's a good enough recruiter. I don't think he wants to recruit, but if he wants to get back into college football, he understands that that's part of the game. And so, I think that would be an interesting name. I mean, Muschamp would be a phenomenal one. I don't think that happens because Kirby is basically letting him work as an analyst that can just go over to Vandy and watch his kid play, who is a freshman, so unless you're going to take a transfer there, which is fine. I think Florida State needs to purge the roster. That'd be fine. Yeah, I do think that making the hires is going to be tough too, like pulling somebody really elite. We spoke with Newberg on Spaces on Wednesday, and most coordinators and assistants are on like a 2-year deal anyway. So they're gonna get paid for 2 years, whether Mike gets fired next year or not. So I think that does help you a little bit. Like you guarantee them a 2-year contract, and that's how you can pull somebody. Even if Mike was to get fired, say we go 4-8 again next year and he gets fired, they're still going to get paid for the 2 years, right? And you might have to fully guarantee it, but you're guaranteed 85% of it anyway. Like that extra 15% isn't really, you're paying 15% over 1 year. Like that's not a big deal because they're going to make it through the first year anyway. So it's not a huge deal to me, but at the same time, like, are you able to pull somebody that's elite with kind of the mess that we have going on right now? So either one of those guys would be great. I kind of agree with you. Yeah, there's some group of 5 guys that, the UNLV guy, Marion, keeps getting tossed around with the go-go offense. That might work. It might not. I don't know. You're putting a lot of eggs into one basket, and if that's what Mike thinks he needs to do. But I do agree with your take that he needs to give up play calling. Like you need a guy that can take that off of his plate, and I actually think he will. But a lot of that again comes down to who he can get. You strike out on a couple of guys, and you can't get who you want on your first 2 or 3 kind of choices. You might just have to go get an absolute stud recruiter and keep play calling. But there's going to have to be some give and take. Like the idea of getting just an elite play caller and elite recruiter at the offensive coordinator position seems far-fetched to me. And so you're probably going to have to go with one or the other. Now that said, you bring in an elite play caller like a Mullen or somebody like that and go put really great recruiters around him, it can work out, right? Good wide receiver recruiter, good tight end recruiter, good offensive line, good running back. Then I think it can work. Or if you go the other way and you go get somebody that is a great recruiter, then talent kind of takes care of itself. But in a perfect world, yeah, you need somebody that's a really good recruiter, or at least an okay recruiter, and a good play caller too. And that's, I think Mike needs to give that up. Defensive side of the ball, kind of the same thing. Fuller was never a very good recruiter. Just kind of didn't relate well with kids. Different kind of personality. I don't think he's a bad guy or anything like that. I just don't think that was his strength by any means. And so I think whoever you bring on the defensive side of the ball is probably going to be an upgrade there from a recruiting perspective. And then you'd hope they're better on the field as well. So yeah, I'm in full agreement with you on that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's somewhat of a gamble because it's a lot easier to do your first time around. But look what Jimbo did when he took over in 2010. None of those coaches he hired outside of Rick Trickett were really thought of as elite coaches. But he brought in a Tim Brewster, uh, Foley. He brought in Eddie Grant. None of those guys were thought of as, oh man, that they are just tacticians when it comes to the film room. But they were all elite recruiters, and that led to 2013 happening. And when
Yeah.
Jimbo, when it came time to make coaching changes, he started bringing in people who were better known as coaches because his recruiting was on a roll at that point. So I think if it's a gamble, it's probably worth it for him because I think he can sell that to the administration and say, hey, yeah, I know the results on the field again this year aren't great, but we're sitting at number 6 in the recruiting rankings. These guys are going to build us a roster that could win a national title. Now, if he does that and they're sitting at number 27 in the rankings in October, November, yeah, this story probably ends after next season. But it's just so important and he gets paid a lot of money to make these decisions and to get it right. So I don't envy him at all.
So what are your thoughts? How many changes do you think are made? Is there anyone you want Florida State to target? Let's talk about that down in the comments. I appreciate you guys, as always, for sticking around with us here on Double Fries No Slaw, even through a tough season. We'll talk to you guys soon. Appreciate BetUS for their support. Go Noles.